I'm Naomi, 29, and I carry the weight of my whole world on my shoulders. Our family used to feel full: my mom, my little sister Aria, and our grandmother May. But life has a way of shrinking things down. Now it's just me and them, each day feeling like a slow unraveling. Grandma May's been sick for years, her body slowly betraying her, and my mom, Denise, has become her full-time caregiver. That means I'm the one holding the financial line, working 2 jobs, stretching every cent like it's made of rubber, praying it doesn't snap. Every evening, I walk through the door exhausted, only to see the same sight: my mom by Grandma's side, gently brushing her hair, her own face hollowed out with worry and fatigue. "You've been resting, right?" I ask her, even though I already know the answer. She just smiles and shrugs. "I'm fine, sweetie." But she's not. None of us are. My dad died when I was 11, and since then, it's always been the 3 of us: Mom, me, and Aria. Back then, Grandma still had her strength, helping to raise us while Mom worked late into the night. I grew up fast. While other kids were out riding bikes or playing video games, I was packing lunches, cleaning the house, walking Aria home from school. When high school ended, I didn't even consider college. We couldn't afford for me to be a dreamer. Now Aria's 17, a senior in high school, and completely oblivious to the chaos behind the curtains. Her biggest concern? Whether she's going to the party this weekend. Our lives are sinking, and she's out here dancing on the deck like it's the Titanic. One night, she stormed into the house, throwing her bag on the floor like it offended her. Ugh. "Naomi, are we broke again? I want to go shopping before Maya's birthday party." I blinked, trying to keep my cool. "Didn't I just give you your allowance 3 days ago?" "It's not enough." And Mom's always too busy with Grandma. No one even cares about me in this house. Mom looked up from the recliner, gave her a weak smile. "I'm sorry, honey. Things are just tight right now." Aria huffed. "This family sucks." I saw red for a second. "Do you even realize how lucky you are?" She rolled her eyes. "Easy for you to say. You get to make your own money. If it's so easy, why don't you try it sometime?" I snapped. But she was already scrolling her phone like I'd vanished. Aria doesn't have a job. Didn't want one. Didn't want to go to college either. Instead, she clings to this dream she's had ever since we went to Miami 5 years ago, opening a bougie little French cafe somewhere in Florida. No experience. No savings. Just this fantasy of mimosas and macarons on palm-lined patios. "Mom," she asked one day, twirling a pencil between her fingers, "if I opened a cafe in Florida, would you help me?" Mom blinked, startled. "A cafe? That sounds nice, but it takes a lot of money, honey." "It'll be fine," Aria said, waving off reality. "I'll figure it out. I couldn't help myself." "Maybe start by figuring out how to clock into a shift first." She just laughed. "You have no dreams, Naomi." "No wonder you're so grumpy." "Dreams?" I buried mine in a shoebox years ago, right next to my prom dress and my shot at a normal life. Then one night, my phone started buzzing like crazy while I was on my way home from the evening shift. I saw Aria's name flashing on the screen. 6 missed calls. My heart dropped. When I called her back, she was sobbing. "Naomi, please." "I'm in trouble." My stomach clenched. "What happened?" "I need you to come pick me up. Please." I messed up. She gave me the address. A club downtown. I should have seen this coming. She'd been going out more lately. Drinking. Coming home late. Sometimes not at all. When I pulled up, she was sitting on the curb, mascara streaking down her cheeks. 2 cops stood nearby, along with a guy in a tailored suit talking angrily on the phone. "You, her sister?" one of the officers asked. "Yeah, what happened?" "She got into an argument with that gentleman. Turned physical. Witnesses say she slapped him." "What? Why?" "She was intoxicated. Thought he owed her drinks or something." I turned to Aria. "Tell me you didn't. I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I just had too much." "He was being a jerk," the officer asked her directly. "Did you hit him?" "Yeah," she muttered. "I'm sorry." They took her in. First offense. She got lucky the man didn't press charges. But it didn't feel like luck when I had to explain everything to Mom that night. "She was arrested?" Mom gasped, her voice breaking. "She's okay, but this can't keep happening." The next day, Arya was back on the couch, sipping a smoothie like nothing happened. "Make sure this doesn't happen again," the officer had warned. She shrugged. "It wasn't a big deal. I lost it." "Not a big deal? You were arrested, Arya. What if he had pressed charges?" Mom, trying to soften things, stepped in. "Naomi, don't be so harsh. She's young. She made a mistake. No more excuses." Arya crossed her arms, sulking. "I'm not listening to another lecture." The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to find her scrolling her phone. "Mom," she chirped, "can I borrow some money? I need to go shopping, get my mind off things." I couldn't believe it. "What part of yesterday didn't register?" Arya looked at me like I was overreacting. "Chill. It's done. Let's move on." I looked at Mom. "Please don't give her money. You're just enabling her. She just needs a little break," Mom whispered, opening her wallet. I turned and left before I said something I'd regret. That night, I sat beside Grandma. Her breathing was light, eyes closed, skin cold. "Mom," I said softly, "shouldn't we take her to the hospital?" "I've spoken to the doctors," they said. "It's time." And just like that, the room fell into silence. Grandma passed that night, quietly, peacefully, while holding Mom's hand, but nothing about it felt peaceful to me. The house felt different without Grandma May. It was subtle at first, the absence of her soft hums, the smell of her lavender lotion, the gentle creak of her rocking chair. But over the next few days, it settled in like fog, quiet, still, cold. Mom didn't speak much. She wandered the house like a ghost, touching the walls like they could still talk to her. Some mornings, I'd find her sitting on the edge of the recliner where Grandma used to rest, holding her handkerchief and staring into nothing. Meanwhile, Arya, she barely blinked. Her reaction was a shrug and a scroll through Instagram. The day after the funeral, she posted a filtered selfie with the caption, "New Beginnings #Florida Dreams." I stared at it for a full minute, trying to convince myself I wasn't seeing it right. But there it was. Grandma wasn't even in the ground a full 48 hours, and Arya was talking about new beginnings. I didn't say anything then. I didn't trust myself not to explode. Instead, I kept my head down, worked, cooked, cleaned, paid the bills, the usual. But Mom, she started changing. Every morning, she'd knock softly on Arya's door. "Sweetie, do you want to go for a walk today? Or maybe get coffee?" Some days Arya went, most days she didn't. But Mom kept asking. One Saturday, I came home from my morning shift to find them both in the living room, shopping bags everywhere. "What's all this?" I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. "Retail therapy?" Arya chirped. "We hit the mall." I looked at Mom, who smiled weakly. She thought it'd help. And it did. Using what money? Mom hesitated. I used a little from Grandma's savings. Just a small amount. I couldn't believe it. "Mom, we need that money for bills." "You know that." She looked away. "We needed a moment, Naomi. Just one moment." I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. But something inside me shifted that day. The next few weeks blurred together. Mom started spending more time with Arya, less time resting. I'd catch them giggling over YouTube videos, planning little outings, even talking about apartment listings. In Florida. That word kept popping up like a virus, Florida. At first, I thought it was just Arya's fantasy flaring up again. But then I noticed Mom looking at condos on her tablet. One night, I overheard them whispering in the kitchen. Phrases like a fresh start and new chapter. I should have said something. I should have asked what was going on. But I didn't want to believe it. Then came the letter. 3 months after Grandma's passing, I came home late from a long double shift. The house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. No shoes by the door. No bags in the hallway. The air was hollow. I walked into the living room and saw a single envelope on the coffee table with my name scrawled across it. Naomi. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Naomi, we've left for Florida. Arya needs me now, and I want to support her dream while I still can. Thank you for everything you've done. I'm so grateful. Please take care of yourself." Mom, I stood there frozen, the paper shaking in my grip. No warning, no goodbye, no conversation. They just left. My chest tightened. It wasn't just the abandonment, it was the betrayal. I gave everything to this family. Every paycheck, every weekend, every bit of rest I never got. And in the end, they packed up and left like I was just background. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, silent, until the next morning. A notification pinged on my phone. Fraud alert. Suspicious activity on my bank account. I opened the app. Multiple failed withdrawals from a location in guess where? Florida. My jaw clenched. I hadn't told anyone my PIN, but Mom had borrowed money before, small amounts, nothing major. I always said yes. But now I realized it had started months ago. Subtle changes, little requests, asking if I still had that savings account I never touched. It was all adding up. Shaking, I froze my debit card and shut off access to my credit lines. I added travel restrictions, just in case they tried anything else. That night, I found documents still lying on the dining table. Listings, mortgage pre-approvals, photos of beachfront condos with cheesy slogans like "Paradise Awaits." Suddenly, I wasn't confused anymore. They hadn't just left on a whim, they'd planned it. For weeks. Maybe longer. They used my money, my silence, my loyalty to plot their escape. And they didn't even leave me a damn key to lock up behind them. I called Mom. She answered after a few rings. Her voice was light at first, like nothing was wrong. "Naomi, what did you do?" I asked. A pause. "We just needed a new start. With my money, it wasn't supposed to go like this." Arya pushed it. I wasn't thinking clearly. I took a breath, steadying my voice. "You weren't thinking clearly for 3 months? I'm sorry. That doesn't fix anything, I know." Then came the call from Arya. Her number popped up while I was still processing Mom's voice in my ears. I shouldn't have picked up, but I did. "Naomi," she said quickly, "I need your help. I don't have enough for the deposit. Can you send me something? Just a little to get started?" I cut her off. "You left me behind, Arya. You used my money and ran. I didn't mean to. You meant every bit of it." Silence. "You always told me I didn't have dreams. But I did. I dreamed of a family that didn't treat me like a tool." She started to speak again, but I ended the call, blocked both numbers. Then I stood in the middle of our hollow living room, staring at the empty spots where their shoes used to be. And I made a decision. I didn't sleep much that night. My brain refused to slow down, thoughts tumbling like loose marbles in a box. Everything felt surreal. Just 24 hours ago, I still thought we were a family. A strained one, yes, but still a family. Now, I was alone in a quiet house that echoed with memories, staring at a half-used coffee mug my mom left behind. They didn't even bother to clear their browser history, Florida property websites, budget spreadsheets, drafts of emails to realtors. It was all there like a digital paper trail of betrayal, like they assumed I'd never notice, or worse, never matter. The following morning, I stood in the hallway for a long time. No breakfast smells coming from the kitchen. No bickering over who used the last of the creamer. Just silence. For a moment, it felt terrifying. But then, something else stirred in me. Relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to explain myself. Didn't have to budget groceries around someone else's cravings. Didn't have to defend why we couldn't afford a new dress or another round of drinks. There was no Arya begging, no Mom apologizing on her behalf. It was just me, and that was okay. I started packing the next day, not in a dramatic bags by the doorway. This was slow, intentional. Each drawer I cleared out, each closet I sifted through, felt like peeling back a layer of exhaustion I'd carried for too long. There was a time I thought staying meant love, that sacrificing my own life was noble. But I'd come to understand something painful and true love without boundaries turns into a leash. And I was done being tethered. The job I held down for years, the one that barely paid the bills but had great benefits, I quit. I didn't walk out in anger. I gave notice, left with grace. But I knew I was meant for more than holding up other people's weight while my own dreams gathered dust. I found a small studio apartment across town. It wasn't fancy, but it had sunlight and silence. And when I turned the key in the door, I knew this was mine. No one asking for money, no one needing a ride, no one waiting to guilt me into staying. My first night there, I cooked pasta and danced barefoot in the kitchen to an old R&B playlist. It was such a small thing, but it felt huge. I couldn't remember the last time I danced just because I felt like it. Over the next few weeks, I started building a life. I signed up for an online course in digital marketing, a field I'd always been curious about, but never had the space to explore. I watched lectures while eating dinner, took notes with a pen that hadn't touched paper since high school. Slowly, I began to remember who I was before everything revolved around surviving. And then, opportunity knocked. A friend of mine, Kelly, who ran a small startup, needed someone to handle their email campaigns and social media presence. I offered to help temporarily. That temporary gig turned into a contract. That contract turned into a full-time role. Within 2 months, I was making more than I ever had before. It wasn't just about the paycheck, it was the pride. For the first time, I was earning from something that wasn't soul-draining. I was building something for me. But the past has a funny way of creeping back in. It started with Instagram. I didn't follow Aria anymore, but her posts were public. Curiosity got the better of me one night, so I looked. The aesthetic cafe dream? Non-existent. Instead, her feed was filled with sad captions, photos of empty apartment rooms, a close-up of a broken espresso machine, a picture of her crying captioned, "Nothing ever works out." Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt nothing. No sympathy, no anger, just detachment. It was like watching a stranger. Then the messages started. First from Mom. "Naomi, I don't know what to do. Aria's struggling. She's depressed." I thought this would be good for her. I didn't respond. Then Aria tried. "I didn't mean for it to go like this. I was scared. I thought you'd stop us if you knew. Please, can we talk?" Still, I said nothing. The silence was my answer. I knew exactly how these stories went. One minute you're the villain for saying no. The next you're the hero if you cave and fix everything. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. Not this time. Instead, I focused forward. I upgraded my apartment, got a bookshelf and started collecting secondhand novels again, took myself out to brunch on Sundays, found a therapist who helped me unravel years of caretaking trauma. I didn't even realize I had, and little by little, I reclaimed my name. Not Naomi, the responsible one. Not Naomi, the backup parent. Just Naomi. I even started sharing small updates on a blog, nothing fancy, just reflections. Thoughts on family, boundaries, rediscovery. I never expected anyone to read it, but slowly, comments started appearing. This hit so hard. I thought I was the only one who felt guilty for leaving my family. "You have no idea how much I needed this today." Strangers, echoing parts of me I thought no one would understand. Funny, isn't it? The same internet that once drained me now reminded me I wasn't alone. One night, I got a final message from Mom. "Naomi, we're coming back. Florida didn't work out. Aria wants to move in for a while until she figures things out. Maybe we can all have dinner sometime?" It sat in my inbox for 2 days before I answered. "I hope you both find your path. But I'm not part of that anymore. Please don't reach out again." I hit send, closed my laptop, and stared out the window at the quiet city lights. I didn't cry. I didn't doubt. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone walking away from something. I felt like someone finally arriving. Time passed differently when the wait was gone. No more alarms set before sunrise. No last-minute rides to the pharmacy. No half-cooked dinners left cold because someone forgot to turn the stove off. My life moved at my pace now. Steady, quiet, focused. Weekends were mine again. I'd sit by the window on Sunday mornings, sipping coffee with my journal open, watching the world drift by. Sometimes I'd even forget how fast things had changed. How recent the rupture really was. Peace, I learned, isn't loud. It's a soft and steady hum. It's freedom in small things. And then, like it always does, the past decided to ring the bell anyway. It started with a voicemail. I hadn't blocked the number maybe out of curiosity, or maybe just laziness, but I never picked up. "Not anymore, Naomi. It's me. It's Mom. I know you asked for space, but something's happened. Please call me. Please." I didn't. Not at first. I figured it was another attempt to play on guilt. Another plea for help without accountability. But that night, the unease sat heavy on my chest. What if it was serious? I gave it 2 more days. Then I called. She answered like she'd been waiting by the phone. Naomi? My voice was calm. What happened? A pause, a shaky breath. It's Arya, she collapsed. At work, those words shouldn't have hit as hard as they did. But my breath caught anyway. She has been working double shifts at some diner, Mom said, her voice cracking. Trying to make ends meet. She fainted. They rushed her to the hospital. It was scary. I stayed quiet, letting her talk. I know what we did was wrong, she continued, voice trembling. But I didn't know how bad things were getting with her. I thought she was handling it. How's she doing now? She's home, recovering. The doctor said it was exhaustion. Malnutrition, stress, all of it. Naomi, she's not okay. I didn't know what to say. I didn't owe them anything, not anymore. But a part of me, buried deep under layers of resentment and distance, still twisted hearing that. Mom didn't ask me to visit, didn't ask for money. Maybe she knew better this time. But the message was clear. They were unraveling. Again, after I hung up, I stared at my ceiling for a long time. I thought of all the nights I carried this family like a mule, exhausted and invisible. I thought of how quickly they left, how easily they walked away from me. But I also thought of Arya, collapsed on the floor of some greasy Florida diner, alone, afraid. Was that really karma? Or just another cycle repeating itself? The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove to the old house. It was still on the market. Empty, windows boarded up, yard overgrown. I stood outside for a moment, just looking. That house held so many ghosts, not just of Grandma, but of me. Of the girl who used to sit at the kitchen table with bills spread everywhere, trying to do the math on how to stretch a $500 paycheck. I stood there for a long time, not going in, not knocking, just breathing. And then I turned around and left. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and returned to the blog. I used to think forgiveness was something you gave to someone else. But I'm starting to realize it's something you do to set yourself free. Forgiveness isn't saying what you did was okay. It's saying, I'm done carrying it. I hit publish and shut the lid. That night, I dreamed of waves crashing on a Florida beach. Not a vacation dream, but Arya, knee deep in the ocean, looking lost, calling my name, but the wind blew too loud for me to hear her clearly. She kept calling, and I kept walking. The farther I got from her, the quieter everything became. I woke up calm. Sometimes your heart breaks open just enough to let something new grow. I didn't respond to Mom's next few texts. They were simple updates. Arya's recovering. Arya's looking for new work. Arya asked about you, but I wasn't ready. Maybe she needed healing. But so did I. Instead of going backward, I went further forward. I accepted an invitation to speak at a local women's center about financial independence, boundaries, emotional burnout, the kind of things I wish someone had taught me earlier. I stood in a small room filled with women of all ages, some with babies on their laps, others clutching notebooks like lifelines. I told them my story not in anger, but in truth. I thought love meant giving everything I had, I said, looking around the room. But sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop giving when it's hurting you. Afterward, a young woman stopped me by the door. Thank you, she whispered. You made me feel less crazy. That moment stuck with me more than any paycheck ever had. The ripple of my healing was reaching others. That mattered. A month later, I got another letter. Not an email, not a text. A real envelope addressed in familiar handwriting. Inside was a simple card. No manipulation, no begging. Naomi, I've been reading your blog. I see how much you've grown. I'm proud of you. I miss you every day, but I understand why you had to go. Arya is trying. She's working. She's learning. Slowly. I'm learning too. Maybe someday you'll want to see us again. Until then, I'll wait with love and hope. Always, Mom. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger reading her words. I didn't feel guilt. I felt still. I placed the card on my shelf, next to a framed photo of me and Grandma. I lit a candle for both of us, one for the past that shaped me, and one for the woman I was becoming. I didn't know if I'd ever reconnect with Mom or Arya, but I knew one thing for sure: I wouldn't lose myself again trying to save people who weren't ready. And that was enough. Time kept moving, but it wasn't rushing anymore. It had slowed into something gentle, like a river that no longer fought its own current. My life had become steady. small in the best ways. I was working remotely now, freelancing for 2 steady clients and picking up side projects when I wanted. I had savings, routines, and quiet joy. Some evenings, I'd sit on the balcony with a glass of wine, listening to the city buzz softly in the distance. The chaos of the past felt like a movie I'd walked out of halfway through. I didn't need to see the ending anymore. I was living mine. But peace doesn't mean the past disappears. Sometimes it sends little ripples across still water just to see if you'll notice. It came in the form of an email. Subject, community outreach invite. I almost ignored it, thinking it was spam. But when I opened it, my eyes caught on one name buried in the paragraph. Aria. The email was from a nonprofit I'd partnered with once for a financial literacy workshop. They were launching a program for young adults recovering from burnout and family estrangement. The director wrote to ask if I'd consider joining as a mentor. At the bottom of the email was a note. One of our participants, Aria Moore, said she'd been following your blog for months. She didn't mention you're related, but she said your writing saved her. I froze. I read the message again. And again. Aria, a participant in a program about rebuilding. She hadn't used our connection to get in. She hadn't tried to force a conversation through the back door. She'd just watched, listened, learned, and she was trying. I leaned back in my chair, hands still resting on the keyboard. The woman I was a year ago would have shut the laptop, closed the door, and buried the key. But I wasn't her anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't wounded. I was curious. Still, I didn't respond right away. I gave myself a few days to breathe through the old memories. I talked to my therapist. I journaled. I sat with the possibilities, not of reunion, but of what healing could look like from 2 different directions. When I finally wrote back, I kept it simple. I'm open to speaking, but I won't mentor anyone I'm personally connected to. If Aria wants to reach out separately, she knows how to find me. Thanks for the message. I appreciate your work. That was it. A boundary. Clear, fair. And then I let it be. A week later, I got a message on my blog's contact form. Naomi, I didn't expect that email to reach you. I didn't expect anything, really. I just wanted to learn. And your words helped me more than I can say. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know. I'm trying to be better. I see everything now, what I did, how I treated you, how much I leaned on you without ever offering anything back. I don't blame you for leaving. I admire you for it. You showed me what self-respect looks like. Thank you. Aria reading that message didn't make me cry. It didn't crack something open in me. It settled me. She wasn't asking me to forgive. She wasn't asking to be let back in. She was just telling the truth. And sometimes, truth is the first and final gift someone can offer. I didn't write back, not because I was angry, but because there wasn't anything left that needed to be said. Closure doesn't always come in conversations. Sometimes, it arrives quietly like soft rain on a window or an old song playing in a cafe you once loved. Instead, I poured my energy into the program. I signed on as a mentor separate from Aria's group and began working with 3 women who reminded me of younger versions of myself. Each one carried invisible weights. Each one was trying to learn how to let go. In helping them, I healed more than I expected. One of them, a shy 22-year-old named Kyra, asked me during a session, "How do you stop feeling guilty for choosing yourself?" I paused, smiled gently, and said, "You don't stop feeling it right away. You just learn that peace is worth more than permission." She nodded slowly, tears brimming. We both understood. Months passed. Summer turned into fall, and the air carried that crispness that makes you want to start over. One evening, as I walked home from a bookstore with a new journal tucked under my arm, I saw a familiar figure across the street, Mom. She didn't see me. She was coming out of a community center, holding a binder and a paper coffee cup. Her hair had more gray in it now. She moved slower, but she looked lighter, like someone who had finally stopped carrying everyone else's baggage. I didn't cross the street. I didn't call out. I just stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the crowd. There was no pain, just a strange sense of okayness. Some people you don't lose with a fight. You just grow in a different direction. Later that night, I lit a candle and wrote in my journal, "Letting go doesn't always mean saying goodbye. Sometimes it just means no longer waiting for the return. Sometimes it means walking forward while still leaving the door unlocked, not open, not closed, just unlocked. If they knock one day, maybe I'll answer. Maybe I won't. But the life I've built doesn't depend on their presence anymore. And that's the difference. The end didn't feel like an ending at all. It was more like stepping out of a storm you didn't realize you'd been walking through for years. There's a moment when the rain stops, the clouds part, and the silence that follows isn't emptiness, it's space. Space to breathe, space to move, space to begin. That's where I was now. Not standing at some grand finish line, no ribbon stretched across a stage. Just me in a small, sun-warmed apartment, coffee in one hand and peace in the other. I'd spent so long surviving that I almost didn't recognize what it meant to simply live. No more pretending I was okay while falling apart. No more quiet sacrifices to keep someone else's world spinning. No more waiting for anyone to catch up to the version of me I'd fought to become. The blog was still going strong. Not viral, not huge, but steady. Intimate. Readers came back for the honesty, for the mess and the healing and the parts that didn't fit neatly into a self-help quote. I told the truth, and people stayed because they saw their own reflection in it. And then one day, something unexpected happened. I got invited to speak on a podcast. The host had read one of my posts, The Burden of Being the Strong One, and reached out with a kind, thoughtful message. She wanted to talk about family roles, burnout, and what it means to walk away without bitterness. I hesitated at first. Public speaking still made my palms sweat. But something inside me whispered, "You're ready." And I was. The interview was raw and honest. We talked about caretaking, emotional guilt, boundaries that get confused with walls. When I spoke about Arya and my mom, I didn't flinch. I didn't sugarcoat. But I also didn't speak with spite. They were doing the best they knew how, I said quietly. But that doesn't mean I had to stay and break with them. The episode got shared more than I expected. Emails trickled in from women, men, even teenagers who saw their own stories woven through mine. You gave me permission to choose myself. I've carried my family for so long. I'm finally learning to set it down. I listened to your voice and didn't feel alone anymore. I read every message. I didn't respond to all of them, but I carried each one like a small stone in my pocket. Proof that healing, when shared, can ripple wider than we'll ever know. Sometime later, I was offered a part-time position as a community advisor for the same nonprofit Arya had once joined. It wasn't just about writing now. It was about sitting across from real people in real pain and offering them tools I had once had to carve out alone. On my first day, I passed a bulletin board near the break room. Photos of mentors and past participants were pinned in a mosaic of smiles and scribbled thank you notes. And there she was, Arya, smiling, holding a certificate, her hair longer, expression softer. I stood there for a moment, hand on the edge of the frame, unsure what I felt. Pride? Maybe? Sadness? A little. But mostly, peace. We were two trees that once grew tangled together. But now, we were rooted in different soil. That was okay. Some things grow stronger when they're apart. One afternoon, weeks later, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't dramatic, just two soft taps. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it slowly. It was Mom. She looked different, older, smaller, but steadier. She held a small potted plant in both hands, like a peace offering. "I won't stay," she said, voice quiet but clear. "I just wanted to see you with my own eyes. And tell you something." I stepped aside, letting her in. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We sat on the couch in silence for a moment. The air between us wasn't heavy, just fragile. "I'm proud of you," she said finally. "Not because you forgave me, not because you came back, but because you didn't let what we did stop you from becoming who you were meant to be." I nodded slowly. "Thank you. I read every blog post," she added with a soft smile. "Even the ones that hurt. I never meant to hurt you, I know. But truth isn't supposed to be painless." We sat there a little longer. She didn't ask to come back into my life. She didn't ask for anything at all. She just left the plant on the coffee table, stood up, and hugged me gently. "I'll go now," she whispered. "You can visit again," I said before I even realized the words were coming out. "Not often, not for long, but sometimes." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't break. She nodded. That was it. No grand reunion. No dramatic apologies. Just honesty. And space. And room to grow. That night, I moved the plant to the windowsill. It wasn't a symbol of forgiveness. It wasn't some metaphor waiting to bloom. It was just something alive, brought to me with care. And that was enough. The following week, I gave a workshop on rebuilding after emotional burnout. I stood in front of a room of tired faces and quiet hope. I used to think strength meant carrying everything alone, I told them. Now I know real strength is knowing what's yours to carry and what never was. Afterward, a woman came up to me, eyes red but smiling. I'm walking away tomorrow, she whispered. Because of you. I hugged her tight. Not because I saved her, but because I understood. We don't always get neat endings. We don't always get closure wrapped in bows, but we can choose peace. We can choose ourselves. We can begin again and again. Story 2, Lucy is my twin sister, and my name is Sophia. We are twins, but our connection is not at all what you might think. Despite the fact that our birthdays coincide, the only similarity between us is that I was clearly not the child my parents had dreamed for from the start. It appeared that I was the unplanned addition to their one planned kid. Lucy embodied our mother in every way, with her blue eyes and blonde hair. The dark hair and eyes that reminded me of my grandmother, whom my mother could not stand, were traits I received from my father's side. My haven was my grandmother's shoe business. The familiar scent of polish and leather surrounded me like a warm hug. The clicking of heels on the wood floor produced a soothing tune each time I entered, erasing the chaos of my home life. Compared to our real flat, the shoe store felt more like home. My tiny business person is there. When I walked into the business after school, my grandma would give me a warm greeting. When grandma saw me, her wise and smiling face would always light up with sheer delight. I felt appreciated and acknowledged for the first time. At an early age, I started helping out around the business, and my grandmother would lift me up onto a high stool at the counter so I could observe her using the antique cash register. My duties at the shop increased as I got older, and I became well-versed in every aspect of it. It was different at home. Why can't you simply dress like your sister, Sophia? As she tried to dress me in clothes that never fit me, my mother would groan. Lucy thought they were cute, but I thought they were absurd. I appear foolish. I would object. The difference in our parents' treatment of us became glaringly obvious as we grew older. The one that was always preferred was Lucy. In contrast, I was viewed as the trustworthy one who would eventually have to provide for the family via hard labor. They advised me that you should concentrate on being responsible, using the term responsible to mean to obey without protest. We shared a small flat and were often worried about money. My mother was a store assistant, and my father was an insurance agent. Lucy always seemed to obtain anything she wanted, from the newest technology to new outfits, even if our budget was limited. Knowing about a hidden fund my paternal grandmother had established for our schooling was the only thing that lifted my spirits. During a visit, she had explained to me that the funds were intended for college expenses for both Lucy and me. Despite the difficulties of my adolescence, holding fast to this promise offered me hope and a sense of stability. I had a tiny ray of optimism as our 17th birthday approached. Maybe as we get closer to maturity, my folks would start treating us fairly. Perhaps people would at last perceive me for who I was, rather than merely as a variation of my apparently more popular twin, Lucy. But I was about to encounter a glaring letdown. Our birthday morning was beautiful and cheerful. Lucy was still sleeping soundly, perhaps dreaming of the lavish celebration her mother had been planning for weeks. I was up early, grappling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. My nerves. Denise. After I had eaten some of my bread, Dad called me into the living room. He carried a little metal box next to him, and his face was expressionless. Mom's lips were so tightly pursed that they were almost invisible. Dad said, "Sophia," in an oddly formal tone, as though he were talking to a complete stranger instead of his daughter. "You need to learn how to save money and be responsible." The package felt surprisingly chilly and hefty when he handed it to me. I recognized it as a key to a safe deposit box as I grasped it. Mom said harshly, "You'll have to earn the money yourself if you want to go to college." There was no warmth in her voice. My breath was taken away from me by the shock, which seemed like a physical blow. My voice was no more than a whisper when I finally managed to speak. However, what about the funds that Grandma saved for her schooling? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Dad suddenly became interested in a point on the wall, and Mom's eyes narrowed menacingly. Mom said icily, "There is no money for your education, Sophia. If you choose to study, you will have to earn it." Grandma, however, recommended I start it. My head was spinning with incredulity. "It is forbidden for you to discuss this with your grandma," Mom interrupted me. I was completely chilled by the severe warning that flashed in her eyes. "You won't see her again if you do. You get it?" I nodded, speechless at the idea of being apart from Grandma. It was too much to take from the only person who truly cared about me. I held the keys to the safe deposit box so firmly that my hand was bitten by the edges. The agony in my heart, however, was far worse than the pain. Lucy's friends soon arrived, and the flat began to bustle. Everywhere you look, you can hear them laughing and talking. Feeling invisible in my own house, I stayed in the kitchen. Mom had made it clear that Lucy was the reason for this celebration. No one was to be invited. Dad gladly yelled out, "Sophia, it's cake time, come on!" Lucy was sitting brightly in front of a big cake with 17 flickering candles as I arrived into the living room. She made a wish and blew out the candles to cheers. I gave her pals portions of cake in silence. The icing had an overpoweringly sweet, somewhat sickening flavor. A mother and father exchanged a covert look, while everyone else was preoccupied. "Lucy, we have a surprise for you, honey," Dad said, grinning broadly. A few moments later, Lucy reappeared with a set of car keys in her hand, her face beaming with happiness. "My parents bought me a vehicle." The keys danced on her finger as she exclaimed. Her new present was lauded in the room. I took a step back, the difference between us more obvious than before. I was only a bystander in the background of Lucy's limelight tonight. It was her night. "Isn't she incredible?" Lucy swung the vehicle keys in front of my face as she pranced over to where I was sitting. "What have you got me for our birthday, sis?" She spoke softly, but there was a playful gleam in her eyes that I couldn't stand. I returned her gaze while experiencing the searing pain of inequity. They had purchased a vehicle for her. And what did I get? A promise of financial difficulties and an empty safe deposit box. "Okay," Lucy smiled, now almost smugly. My absence was broken by something inside of me. With a strong voice, I stood up so fast that my chair fell over. "My gift to you is that. Have fun." After saying that, I hurried to our shared bedroom, leaving a trail of stunned quiet in my wake. I took out my luggage and began packing it full of clothing. I moved erratically, driven by a combination of anger and determination. "What are you doing, Sophia?" From the doorway came Mom's voice, which was more annoyed than worried. "I'm going," I said without looking in her direction. "I will remain with my grandmother." She took hold of my arm as I walked by her bag. "Do you recall?" "Don't talk to your grandmother about the car or the college money," she screamed. "I get it." I wrenched my arm free and walked away without looking back. Nobody made an attempt to stop me. I finally made it to Grandma's place after what felt like an endless bus trip. Grandma's face was filled with a mixture of surprise and worry when she opened the door in the late evening. "What are you doing here, Sophia, my love?" She repeated another of her mother's falsehoods when she replied, "I thought you were out celebrating with friends. All I wanted was to see you." With all the burden of the day bearing down on me, I muttered abruptly, "Can I spend tonight here?" That night, as I laid in the guest room, the cozy silence of my grandmother's home surrounded me. But I kept thinking about the day's events, which were a whirlpool of deceit and disappointment. There was a strong desire to tell Grandma everything. I didn't say anything, though, because I remembered Mom's threat. The only person who gave me a sense of worth was someone I couldn't risk losing. I worked up the nerve to talk up what had been on my mind all night when Grandma was busy in the kitchen the next morning. "Grandma," I made an effort to sound informal. "Is there any chance I might work properly at your shop and perhaps remain for a while?" Simply said, "With Lucy and everything, things are rather noisy at home." Grandma stopped, spatula in hand, and gave me a kind glance. "You can, of course, my dear. I wish you were here more often." My life suddenly took a different turn. Grandma proved to be a patient and perceptive teacher. and I started working at the shoe store after school after learning the ropes. She gave me lessons in everything from customer service to inventory management. She would prepare dinner and genuinely listen to my day as we closed the store together each evening and headed home. I felt loved and cared for the first time. Weeks became months and days became weeks. To be honest, I didn't miss it and didn't go back home. Dad and Mom never checked in or called. They appeared to be content with my disappearance from their lives. Grandma insisted that I receive my entire salary because I deserved it. I kept every penny, observing the growth of my bank account. But even with Grandma's generosity, attending college still seemed like a distant dream. I started to consider my options as my 19th birthday and high school graduation drew near. Optimistic but unsure of what lay ahead, after settling into a seat in the auditorium, I watched as the crowd erupted with applause when Lucy's name was announced. Mom and Dad were visibly overjoyed, their cheers echoing through the room. In contrast, when it was my turn to be recognized, the only applause came from Grandma, who clapped vigorously from the back row. Post-ceremony, my parents showered Lucy with attention, snapping photos and presenting her with gifts, barely acknowledging my presence. Although it hurt, this lack of attention was something I had grown accustomed to. "You did great, kiddo," Grandma said, embracing me warmly. "I'm so proud of you." On the drive home, I gathered my courage and shared my plans. "Grandma, I've decided not to go to college this year." Her expression shifted to one of concern. "But why?" "Sweetheart, I gave your parents money for both your and Lucy's tuition. There should be more than enough for you." My heart pounded as I searched for the right words. Mom's earlier conversation ringing in my ears. "I want to save up some more money," I managed to say, hoping my voice sounded more confident than I felt. "I'd like to rent an apartment near campus and pay for my accommodation. I just want to be more independent." Grandma looked at me thoughtfully for a moment before nodding. "That's very mature of you, Sophia. If that's what you want, I'll support you." And so, while Lucy prepared for college, draped in new outfits and dorm essentials, I dedicated myself to working. My job at the shoe store became a daily lesson in life. Business and self-discovery. Living with Grandma and working became my routine. Each morning, I'd help her with breakfast before heading to the store where the scent of leather and polish once symbolized escape, but now felt like home. I poured myself into my work with unexpected zeal. By day, I assisted customers, my smile unwavering even with the most challenging patrons. At night after closing, I would clean, reorganize the displays, and ensure everything was pristine for the following day. "You've got a real knack for this, Sophia," Grandma observed as I skillfully managed a tricky return or promoted shoe care products. Over time, she began teaching me about the business aspect. I absorbed everything about managing inventory, balancing books, and handling paperwork. "It's possible you could run this store someday," Grandma remarked one evening as we reviewed financials. Her affirmation filled me with a newfound pride. For the first time, I felt seen and valued despite immersing myself in the retail world. The dream of college never dimmed. Each paycheck was mostly saved with only essentials for myself. It was hard watching peers indulge in shopping and social outings, trying on stylish shoes that I could afford but chose not to buy. Each sacrifice was a reminder of my goal. As months turned into a year, I was amazed at the amount saved looking at my bank account. I couldn't help but feel a sense of achievement and anticipation for what the future held. I had finally done it. I'd saved enough money for college. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and dialed a number. I hadn't called in a year. "Hello," came my mom's voice tinged with surprise. "Hi, Mom," I replied, striving to keep my voice even. "I wanted to let you know that I've saved enough for college. I'm going to apply for next semester." There was a lengthy silence before she responded. "Why don't you come over? We should talk about this in person." A mix of emotions turned inside me as I hung up, catching my reflection in the store window. I noticed how much I had changed. The girl staring back was stronger and more confident than the one who had left a year ago. When I arrived at my old apartment, the familiar scent of home was missing, replaced by the sterile aroma of fresh paint and new furniture. Mom greeted me with a strange smile and ushered me inside. "Sophia, darling, come see what we've done with the place," she chirped, guiding me through a living room that felt foreign. Dad followed. nodding as Mom highlighted each new addition. The tour ended in my old bedroom, which I had once shared with Lucy. Now it was transformed into a Pinterest-perfect sanctuary, clearly meant for one. "We had a designer come in," Mom gushed. "Isn't it perfect for Lucy?" I felt like a ghost, revisiting my past. "Where's all my stuff?" I asked quietly. "My books, my photos, everything I left behind." Mom and Dad exchanged a glance. "Oh, honey," Mom began, her voice overly sweet. "We had to clear out all that old stuff, you understand, right? We needed to make space for new energy. It felt like a punch to the gut. Years of memories, pieces of myself, all discarded like trash." I blinked hard, holding back tears. "Why did you ask me to come here?" I demanded, my voice firmer than I felt. Mom's smile faltered. "Let's sit down, will we? I'll make us some tea. Soon." I was sat on the edge of the sofa, a cup of tea and a tray of cookies, formerly my favorite, in front of me. The sweetness now turned to ash in my lips. "Sophia, sweetheart," Mom started, her tone dripping with false worry. "We're in a bit of a problem. You see, Lucy? Well, she realized college wasn't for her. She dropped out after a year." I sat startled. All the money was squandered, money that was intended to be for both of us. "The trouble is," Mom continued, averting my sight, "we need some aid. Exactly about $38,000. That's the majority of the money I saved for college, but I almost choked on it." "Sophia, oh." Mom is extending her hand to pat my hand. I fought the want to back off. "College is not really necessary for you, is it? At Grandma's store, you're doing great. Additionally, you have less expenditures when you live with her." The boldness of what she said made my head spin. Mom's voice fell to a harsh whisper of a conspirator. "Lucy needs a place to live. Her current boyfriend wants to live with her." We believed the funds may be used as a mortgage down payment. She abruptly realized what she had said and trailed off. She stared at her father, who appeared more and more uneasy, and her eyes grew wide. I inhaled deeply, examining myself against the surge of feelings that threatened to overtake me. Unspoken facts weighed heavily on the room's thick atmosphere. "No," I proclaimed more firmly than I actually felt. "I refuse to provide the money. Why not spend the money or sell Lucy's car? Did Grandma set aside money for my schooling?" The look on my mother's face changed drastically. Her face flashed deep crimson with rage after initially going pale, as though it had been emptied of vitality. Her eyes narrowed into angry slits. "Sophia, there's no money left." She gave a hiss. "Lee was poisonous. All of that money was used for Lucy's automobile, house renovations, new furnishings, clothing, and now the car is broken. The insurance won't pay since Lucy crashed it while intoxicated." Every statement was like a smack to me. The funds meant for my future were wasted on frivolities and Lucy's negligence. My skin crawled at the cloyingly sweet tone my mother's voice took on in spite of this. "College isn't actually necessary for girls. Instead, concentrate on finding a decent husband." I became furious at this blatant disregard for my goals, my efforts, and my whole future. "How about my hobbies?" I questioned, my voice trembling with anger and incredulity. "What about my desires?" With a sweep of her hand, as though dismissing a little irritation, she waved me away. "Sophia, we're thinking about what's best for you. After we go, this flat will be yours. Isn't that sufficient?" I couldn't stop laughing. "I'm not interested in your flat. I'd like to get educated." I put a lot of effort into saving that money. "It's mine, too." Her face distorted into a hardly recognizable face as her expression twisted with rage. Her voice was a menacing growl that made me shudder as she towered over me. "Sophia, you'll follow instructions. Now give us the money." However, something had changed within me. Now I was free of the terror that had kept me compliant for so long. With unexpected quickness, I ducked under her outstretched arm and ran to the door, replacing it with a determined resolve. I was pursued down the stairs by their voices. The stairway was filled with obscenities, threats, and profanities. But as I went through the cold evening air, their grip on me loosened with every stride. After I had calmed down, I suddenly realized something. Why had I never mentioned the money to Grandma? Was the money she had given my parents to pay for my schooling now wasted? Waves of this realization swept over me. I had kept quiet because I was so terrified that my mother would break off my contact with my grandmother. I was 19, though, and now I'm an adult. They were no longer in charge of me and could not regulate who I could talk to or see. The words just poured out of me as soon as I walked into Grandma's house. I told her everything, even how they forced me to work for my way and then attempted to take away even the money she had entrusted for her education, and how it was all used for Lucy. Grandma paid attention. With every revelation, her look grew darker. She remained quiet for a while after I was done. She clenched her hands. She mumbled, "They're manipulative and lying," and inhaled deeply. "I'm terribly sorry, Sophia." Before I could react, I ought to have looked into this years ago. With her phone in hand, she stood up. As she dialed my parents' phone, I looked with a mixture of wonder and fear. It was like watching a storm build in the next talk, first rejections. However, Grandma persisted. Grandma remained steadfast. The more dishonestly they spun, the louder her voice became. I could hear Dad's angry voice on the phone when they eventually admitted everything, calling Sophia an ungrateful traitor. Anger sprang in Grandma's eyes. "You have no right to speak to her in such a manner." She hung up after giving a strong snap. Then her face softened as she turned to face me. "I swear to you, Sophia, my love, I'll look out for your best interests. Let me take care of them while you concentrate on your future." I devoted the next few weeks on applying to colleges. To pursue my goals free from the constraints of my family's expectations felt liberating. Then Lucy called out of the blue. She spoke in a light tone, as though the difficult years we had shared were over. "Can you lend me $7,000, sis?" Eagerly, she inquired, describing her intention to sign up for an online course aimed at luring rich partners. "I'm going to quickly become wealthy by snagging a millionaire. I swear I'll repay you." I was shocked when she asked, "Lucy, that's disrespectful and absurd. That is not something I endorse," I protested. Dismissing my worries as prudish, she begged, "Logan is no longer with me. A boring life is not what I want. I want to be wealthy, luxury." However, I refused to back down. "Not at all." With a mixture of sympathy and disgust, I hung up and said, "Don't call me for things like this again." That was our final conversation. I started college a few months later and chose business management as my major. Every day was a priceless chance for me to develop into the person I was meant to be. Grandma came to my small dorm room one weekend and broke the bad news. My parents' flat had to be sold. They had even asked to live with Lucy, but they were in debt from funding her foolish endeavors. "What did you say to them?" My voice was tense as I asked. Grandmother's face lit up with a warm, contented smile. "I corrected them by pointing out their deceit and the way they have treated you," she clarified. I gave her a tight hug as my heart grew grateful. Tears are streaming down my face. "Thank you for everything, Grandma. It means the world to me that you believe in me and support me no matter what. Without you, I don't know where I would be." As we sat together, a profound sense of tranquility surrounded us. It had been a difficult trip, and I expected more difficulties to come, but I felt a true sense of freedom in that instant. I was genuinely freed for the first time from deceit and irrational expectations. I was allowed to be myself. Story 3. I'm Goldie, and I recently turned 15. It's incredible to see how much my life has changed over the last 2 years. I feel as though my entire world has been turned upside down twice. Beginning at the age of 13, my mom ended up keeping the house after my parents divorced at that point. My mom once boasted on the phone that she finally got what she deserved, and I stayed with her while my dad consented to a sizable alimony payment. My mother's answers to my frequent questions about why she and her father separated were evasive. "Your father made his choice," she would remark, Goldie in a tone that was cold and harsh. She argued that I should accept the fact that he no longer wanted to see me or be a part of our life. But anything so confusing could not be accepted. How could my father, who devoted endless hours to my schoolwork and constantly referred to me as his little boy scientist, abruptly stop showing me love? At times, the agony was so severe that I was out of breath. Then I started getting anonymous emails with straightforward but sincere messages of support and love every holiday. My heart skipped a beat when I read one for the first time. My dad must have given them to me. Phrases like "sweetheart," "keep reaching for the stars," and bedtime staples. I didn't tell my mother about these emails. Her attitude appeared to be soured even by his name. Even though Dad's alimony payments more than met our costs, Mom quit her job after the divorce, saying she needed time to recover. She claimed to be on a quest to discover who she was, so she occupied herself with yoga lessons and home repairs. She first met Liam there. Before long, our house was buzzing with conversations about blended families and fresh starts. And then Liam and his kids, Benjamin and Haley, moved in. Everything was drastically altered. Mom changed, lavishing Benjamin and Haley with attention as though they were priceless gems. She worked on Haley's hair for hours and prepared Benjamin's favorite meals, while I felt invisible at home, frequently ignoring me. I approached her one day after being overwhelmed by neglect. She said that Benjamin and Haley needed extra care since they had lost their mother when they were toddlers, and she gave me a pitying but irritated look. Considering my age, she asked me to be tolerant. Taking pictures of the family every weekend became Mom's new preoccupation. She frequently bought new clothing for Benjamin and Haley for these events, and she painstakingly planned our ensembles for what seemed like runway performances. I felt less like a daughter and more like a prop as I was getting dolled up and posing for photos. Although I frequently had to choose from my old wardrobe that coincidentally matched their color scheme. Goldie, don't stand behind Benjamin. Try to grin more naturally by moving to the left. Mom would provide instructions while focusing the camera on her phone to get the ideal picture. Tilt your head a little, Haley dear. Excellent! Hours may pass during these picture shoots while Mom clicked and posed nonstop to get the perfect shot for her social media posts. She would then excitedly display the pictures at family get-togethers. Take a look at how many people liked this. Everyone says we look like the perfect family, she would brag to Uncle Matthew or Aunt Macy. The children look fantastic together, don't they? You'd never guess. Standing there weren't always siblings. I felt like Mom's well-planned play and simply another accessory. As she praised our lovely blended family's merits, to everybody who will hear, the pictures concealed the reality. How Benjamin pretended that I didn't exist, or how Haley would roll her eyes whenever I entered a room. However, the monotonous posing and forced grins weren't the most difficult aspects. It was becoming disconnected from my dad's mother, Grandma Jessie. Mom had been quite clear that seeing her was forbidden after the divorce. Grandma's warm embraces and her real attention to me listening without being distracted by a smartphone were missed. All I had left were the memories of her boisterous laughter and cookie baking in her kitchen. In the meantime, I had to cope with Mom's family members who firmly believed in her idealized family story. I stayed in the background, feeling increasingly invisible as time went on, and the distance between Mom and me grew significantly as they swooned over Benjamin and Haley and complimented Mom on being such a great stepmother. She centered everything around Benjamin and Haley's interests and hobbies, completely absorbed in her new family. Benjamin and Haley's desires dominated weekend plans and family movie nights. Haley's pick for a hip ice cream parlor or Benjamin's selection of a new superhero movie overshadowed my recommendations. I stayed in my room one Sunday while they got ready for another family trip. Nobody stopped over to see how I was doing or to invite me to join. Haley said, "Good, we don't have to pretend to include her anymore," as I heard her say. Mom said nothing in response. Then summer arrived, bringing with it a significant announcement. I would have been ecstatic that once. Everyone was excited when Mom and Liam gathered them in the living room. Mom said, "We have fantastic news," while holding Liam's hand. "We intend to travel to Europe for a month." Haley and Benjamin burst into applause. "Can we visit Venice?" Haley gave a little squeak. "They have the greatest football stadium," Benjamin added. They bounced about with joy like lottery winners while I watched from the couch. Nobody looked at me. Nobody inquired as to whether I was looking forward to the trip. Seeing a happy family on TV that I wasn't a part of made me feel like an outsider. The day before the journey, I was in my chamber, carefully going over my packing list. I looked up to see Haley standing by my dresser, her hands occupied with a pair of scissors and my favorite blue bikini, making thoughtful cuts. With a little sneer on her lips, she sliced through the cloth. I was momentarily paralyzed by the heinousness of her behavior. I was constantly aware of Haley's dislike for me. For the last 2 years, her contempt had been evident, but this conduct was blatantly harsh and unfriendly. I instantly sprang forward, attempting to grab the scissors out of her hand. Haley withdrew, and all of a sudden we were fighting for the scissors. She was petite, but surprisingly powerful. She started to yell, "Help!" throughout our conflict. "I'm being attacked by Goldie!" A flurry of footsteps thundered up the stairs in response to her pleas. We were red-faced and unkempt, with a ripped bikini on the floor between us when Mom and Liam stormed into the room. She attempted to harm me. Haley screamed and ran to her father. She lost her mind when I was simply standing here. "That isn't true," I objected, out of breath from the fight. My swimwear was being torn apart by her. All I wanted to do was stop her. Mom hardly gave the bikini on the floor a glance. "Goldie, what's wrong with you? Did you physically attack Haley because you were so envious of her? Continue to her room till we head to the airport." "You are obviously untrustworthy around Haley." After they departed with Haley, I heard my mother consoling her through my closed door. "We're going to the shopping right now to purchase you some new clothing to make you feel better after this terrible event. So don't worry, dear." As I listened to them go, I sat on my bed and stared at the remnants of my bikini. Nobody inquired as to whether I would require a new swimwear for the trip. My side of the story didn't seem to matter to anyone. With our bags in hand, we assembled in the lobby that evening. As Liam packed the suitcases into the waiting cab, Mom was going over her list again. "After what you did to Haley, I continue to believe that you don't deserve this vacation," Mom replied as she cast a chilly look at me. "But you'll have to come since we can't leave you home alone for a month. Simply try to avoid creating any additional issues at the airport." There was a noticeable tension. Mom gave us our paperwork as we went to the check-in counter. Maybe from the early hour, my stomach rumbled. "The persistent tension or an unresolved emotion?" I said, shifting uneasily. "Mom, I have to go to the loo." She searched through her purse, barely looking up. "Okay, but move quickly." "You are the reason we can't miss our flight. Shall I bring my bag?" I pointed to my luggage. "Just stop it," she yelled. "I will not allow you to take our money and documents." I gave a nod and headed to the toilet, getting around the crowded crowd. Due to the unclear signs, I had to go back twice. About 15 minutes had gone by the time I located the loo and was done. However, my family was not there when I went back to the check-in area. I initially believed I might have misread the counter, ma'am. Panic rising in my voice, I called out, "Liam." None of the people who turned to stare were members of my family. Furiously searching, I began to run, my footsteps resonating on the gleaming airport floor. They might have already passed security. Without a phone, cash, identification, or a boarding pass, I frantically searched the busy airport, my heart thumping loudly. I felt completely stranded from the check-in desk to the restrooms, because Mom had all of those. The food court comes next. With every futile pass around me, my panic grew more intense. Life went on as usual. People pulled their luggage and bid their loved ones farewell with hugs. As my world seemed to fall apart, they were engrossed in their own. After a while, I was so exhausted that I stood in the middle of the terminal's throng, hopeless. My body ached from the loud, heaving sobs that erupted, instead of the quiet, dignified ones. "Do you feel okay, my love?" My tears were interrupted by a soft voice. I saw a woman wearing an airport uniform when I looked up. Her expression lined with concern. "Where are your parents?" she asked, choking back tears. I explained my plight in halting, breathless fragments that my family had left for the bathroom break with all my belongings. Her expression shifted from concern to alarm as she quickly guided me to an airport staff area marked personnel only. Before I knew it, I was seated in a small office, surrounded by serious-looking security staff who peppered me with questions and made calls while examining security footage. Their faces turned grim as they watched. I overheard one of them confirm to another. They checked in, waited until she was away, then proceeded to their gate and boarded the flight. "They've already taken off. Do you have any adult relatives we could call to come get you?" one of the officers asked, his voice softening with a shaky breath. I managed to say, "My dad. I haven't seen him in 2 years, but I know his name and where he used to work." They noted down the information, and soon calls were being made from the next room, wrapped in a borrowed airport blanket. I try not to think about the plane carrying my mother, and what felt like her real family soaring across the Atlantic without me. Then a familiar voice called out, "Goldie!" I looked up to see my dad standing in the doorway, older and more worn than I remembered, but with the same kind eyes that once scoured my bedroom for monsters and beamed with pride at my science projects. "Dad!" My voice cracked and suddenly I was running into his arms, enveloped in a hug so reminiscent of my childhood as we both cried. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he murmured repeatedly. The drive to his place felt surreal. I sat in the passenger seat of his car, stealing glances at him, half afraid he'd vanish if I looked away too long. He now lived in a different part of the city, in a large apartment building I'd never seen before. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said as we ascended to the 8th floor. "My fiancée, Gemma. She's been my rock through everything." Jamal was a warm-faced woman with curly red hair who greeted me with such a compassionate look that it almost brought another wave of tears. Her presence felt comforting, a stark contrast to the cold abandonment I just experienced, and immediately wrapped me in a comforting embrace, as if she had known me forever. "You poor thing," she said, guiding me into the kitchen. "You must be famished. I'm going to fix you a proper meal right now, and I won't take no for an answer." As Gemma got to work in the kitchen, Dad and I settled at the kitchen table. The familiar aroma of coffee permeated the air. He still preferred it black with just a hint of sugar. "Goldie," Dad began, his hands clasped tightly around his mug, his voice steady, yet his hands betraying a slight tremble. "It's time you knew the whole truth about what happened 2 years ago." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I came home early from work that day. A meeting had been canceled unexpectedly. I wasn't supposed to be there." He swallowed hard before continuing. "I found your mother in our living room with Liam. They weren't just talking." My stomach tightened as the implications sank in when I confronted them. "Liam tried to intimidate me and it escalated into a fight. Not my proudest moment. Your mother tried to intervene, and during the struggle, she was accidentally pushed and fell, hitting the coffee table." Dad's voice cracked as he recalled the scene. There was blood on her face from the impact, and her hands were all scraped up. I tried to help her, but before I could do much, she threatened me. She said if I didn't comply with her demands, she'd tell the police I had beaten her. She claimed she had the bruises to prove it, and threatened that I'd end up in jail and never see you again. He looked into my eyes, his own filled with a mix of pain and regret. She demanded a divorce, the house, alimony, and that I cut off all contact with you. She was adamant that if I tried to reach out or tell you the truth, she'd follow through with her threat. The next morning, as I sat at the kitchen counter picking at my breakfast, Gemma joined me with a resolute expression. "Goldie," she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "My brother Luca is a family law attorney. He's excellent, and I think he can help us." Dad, glancing up from his newspaper, looked hopeful for the first time in a while. "You think he'd take the case?" Gemma was already pulling out her phone when I told him what happened at the airport. "He was ready to come right over. He's just waiting for our go-ahead." Everything happened swiftly after that. Luca, a tall man with the same red hair and kind eyes as Gemma, but with an underlying firmness, joined us at the dining room table. He took detailed notes as I relayed my story, occasionally shifting into what Gemma referred to as his lawyer mode. He made several calls then and there, and within hours he had filed paperwork with Child Protective Services and the guardianship authorities. The authorities took an immediate interest, apparently. Abandoning your child at an airport tends to draw rapid attention. A few days later, Dad offered a special visit. "There's someone who's been missing. You dreadfully," he murmured as we traveled through familiar areas. "Someone who never stopped inquiring about you." When we drew up to Grandma Jessie's house, my heart jumped. It looked just as I recalled: the yellow paint, the flower boxes beneath the windows, and the old porch swing where we used to sit and sip lemonade before we could even go to the front door. It swung open. "Goldie!" Grandma wept, her voice strangled with passion. Suddenly, I found myself engulfed in one of her characteristic bear embraces, laden with an aroma of cinnamon and fresh washing. "Oh, my beautiful daughter, let me look at you," she shouted. We spent the afternoon leafing through old photo albums, delighting in Grandma's legendary chocolate chip cookies, and making up on the time we'd missed. She disclosed that she had written birthday cards but never sent them. She had meticulously collected newspaper cuttings of my school's honor roll listings which were hidden away in a drawer. Weeks turned into days, and before I knew it, a month had passed. Mom was traveling over Europe with her ideal new family in the meantime. As seen by their social media posts, they were having a great time. New pictures of Haley posing, Benjamin exploring, and Mom and Liam having romantic meals in Venice were added every day. However, none of them inquired as to my safety, where I was staying, or even if I was doing all right. My mother had all of my possessions, including my laptop and phone, but she didn't seem to care. From Dad's computer, I would access my social media accounts and see that they were active, with comments and likes on postings. The small green next to my name indicates that I am very aware of my internet visibility. However, there was no indication of worry, not even a message. Dad wanted to see how I was doing and said I should be at the home when they got back. As I sat in the living room and listened to the cab arrive outside, my pulse was racing. Dad was waiting for the right time, quietly hidden in Mom's home office. As the key turned in the lock and they came in, carrying shopping bags and suitcases, we could hear their voices through the door, talking happily about their European adventure. When they saw me, they abruptly halted. Mom bounced back quickly, a proud smile lighting up her face. "Take a look at who managed to get home." As they put their luggage down, Liam joked, "You see? We assured you she was okay." At that moment, Dad came out of the office. In an instant, Mom's smug expression changed to amazement rather than rage. "Why in the world are you at my home?" She stepped back against Liam and shouted, "Leave now!" Dad stayed composed and determined. "Macy, I'm here to explain how things will proceed. This time, I'm taking Goldie with me forever. I want to take away your parental rights and filed for full custody. The court has already received the document." Mom's face became white, then red with rage. "That is not possible." Dad's voice became stern. "I have, and I can. There's more. Additionally, we're filing criminal charges for abandoning a youngster at an airport and putting a child in risk, both of which carry severe jail sentences." Mom shuddered in anger. "After what you did to me, do you really think anyone would trust you? I have photos of my wounds to this day. You defeat me, and I'll tell everyone about it." At that time, Dad's smile was one of resignation rather than delight. "Proceed. That old deception is already something my lawyer is ready for. But Macy, here's the deal. Your credibility has only been damaged because you delayed filing a police report. A year has passed since the unthinkable occurred. Without any money, a phone, or identification, my mother left me alone at an airport before leaving for Europe. Security cameras caught the whole incident, from her departing to her getting on the plane, as she appeared unconcerned about abandoning her 15-year-old daughter. How could a mother do that? The video footage, the police report, and the posts she made while on vacation all contributed to my father's indignation, which was evident in court. I never once looked to make sure I was safe. The trial ended quickly. There was no denying the evidence against her. Police testimony, airport footage, and her own betrayals on social media. The judge hardly had time to think. The decision stopped my father's alimony payments and deprived her of her parenting rights. He was given custody exclusively, which just served to codify the fact that we had all come to terms with. As part of their punishment, I would never go back to live with her. The judge's announcement of a year of probation and a substantial punishment for both Mom and her partner, Liam, took the color out of Liam's face. I was not pleased to see them writhe. Rather, I was disinterested, as though I were watching the conclusion of a movie about someone else's suffering. I'm in my new room at my dad's and his fiancée Gemma's house 7 months later, choosing which earrings to wear to Gemma's forthcoming wedding as a bridesmaid. The ceremonial attire is prepared and waiting in a pale blue gown that evokes a lovely summer sky. Mom and her new family discreetly moved away following the trial. Blood, according to my Aunt Linda, who supported us along with the majority of my mother's family, does not justify her behavior. These days, Grandma Jessie comes to see us every Sunday. She brings her favorite chocolate chip cookies and tales that make my father and I laugh and grin while we make new memories. I changed schools, leaving the bitter memories of the previous 2 years behind. I made real friends at Riverside High like Kim and Rachel. Friends who, although not knowing every detail of my background, are kind and supportive. I occasionally catch myself thinking about my mother, Liam, and other people from that past. They appear to be distant, ambiguous characters from a book I read a long time ago. I've blocked them on social media because I no longer need to keep up that connection, not out of animosity. I'm going on. No longer only a supporting character in their romanticized family scenarios. My father frequently remarks that I'm stronger than he was when I was his age. He may be correct. Or maybe I'm just fortunate to be surrounded by individuals who embody the ideal of a true family. People who support you, stand up for you, and ensure that you always feel valued.